Johnson Sandler Training. We're trying out some new tech again today. Again, another chance for a train wreck. But I've got with me Ian Kelsall and from Insight 6. And Ian is a CX director of Insight 6 in this region. And I guess while I just check the tech's working, I'd like you to explain what the hell is CX and why should anybody bother to listen today for the next 30 minutes?
Well, thank you, Roy. So yeah, they're two great questions. So as you're right, I'm Ian Kelsall from Insight 6, and we help businesses across Staffordshire and Cheshire to get more customers, keep more customers, and fundamentally try and sell them more stuff. So what is CX and why should anybody care? CX really is a term that's used to describe, I guess, how customers or clients or patients or students, depending on what sector you operate in, how do they kind of judge their experience with you? How do they feel about their experience with you? And actually, it's kind of built up of three components traditionally. So the first thing is function. Do you do what you say you're going to do? The second part of that is how convenient or easy is it for people to work with you? And then the third part really is the emotional connection, that feeling again. So CX really is a term that's used around how do your clients or customers feel about you as a business and the service that they receive. So if service is something that a business gives, experience is how that is felt or how that's received. Second question, why should we care about it? I guess it's a really interesting question. Some do and some don't. Some understand it and some are looking to understand it. But fundamentally, I guess people make decisions based on emotions and based on guts, based on feel. So if you're not forming some form of connection with your clients, if they're not demonstrated that they know, like, and trust, or there's a bit of emotional connection, then you're often left with only a couple of things to define yourself, which is often the product and the price. And as we know, products can easily be copied and prices can easily be beaten. So it doesn't give you a huge amount, I guess, of opportunities to really win customers or get client loyalty.
That's really interesting. So how would people recognize they need some CX?
Well, everybody's delivering some CX in one way, shape, or form. It just might be that they don't realize it. So I guess whether you know what your client experience is or not is quite interesting. There are indicators that could indicate whether your customer experience is good or bad or indifferent. So typically there are two types of service that people talk about a lot. If it's exceptionally good, they're usually quite easy to give compliments or praise you or your team. So you'll hear lots of compliments about how good you are. If you're exceptionally poor, they're usually quite easy to complain to you as well. So they'll certainly let you know where the expectations haven't met or they are slightly disappointed. So they're the two things that stimulate a lot of conversation. And then you've got the third element where it's fairly average. It's like the Goldilocks zone. It's neither hot nor cold. It's kind of ambivalent. It's like everybody else. And actually, people don't tend to talk about average service. So I guess if you are getting lots of complaints, you might fairly reasonably conclude that your customer experience isn't as good as you would like. If you're getting lots and lots of compliments, you might be comfortable that your customer experience is fantastic. And actually, if you're getting neither of anything, it probably just means that you're fairly average. But average doesn't stand out in that marketplace.
And certainly average, what we look at, average is just top end of poor. Mm-hmm. And certainly, you go into places and it feels like they're doing everything right, but the place is empty. And when you're a leader or a manager of a business and you're looking around, I think we're doing everything right. I mean, how can they fix things like that? How can they get some feeling that they're missing that something? How would they do that?
I suppose that's the beauty around the difference between service and experience. So most businesses can judge the service that they give. There'll be KPIs, there'll be certain service level agreements, there'll be lots of checks and measures and balances and processes and procedures, as we all know that everybody follows in a business. Certainly when managers and leaders are walking around and looking at things, all these process and procedures get followed, of course, in every single business. And I'm sure nobody's watching this thinking, well, actually, we've got loads of process procedures in our business, but none of them get followed. Everybody thinks they're all followed. The second part really is the only person that can judge the experience, that can provide some sort of measure on that experience, is the customers and the clients themselves. So you have to find out what clients think and feel about your business, and the only way you can really do that is to ask. And again, as I said before, sometimes it's the things that people say that are, I guess, good indicators as to whether your CX is good or not. But it's also things that people don't say that I think is also quite interesting. So we kind of get a compliment from 3 or 4 years ago, and we remove the date. We put it on our website as a testimonial, and then we hang on to it like a rotting piece of flesh and convince ourselves that actually, our service is really, really good because somebody once said that we were good 3 or 4 years ago. So therefore, nobody else has complained since. So we're all right then, aren't we? Not necessarily.
Yeah, I love that. I love that phrase, rotting piece of flesh, because you can sort of massage yourself into believing that things are great when they're not so great. And certainly we over time we've shared a lot of dodgy customer experience stories, and I think I spent about half an hour regaling you with my IKEA story. Not for today, but you remember the things that are less than optimal, and if I was owning a business, and I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know what. I mean, I'm probably best not doing anything, right?
Well, great question. There are various options. So what tends to happen in these kind of businesses, they look at their sales line that's going backwards or is standing still. They get hold of their marketing team and say, well, we need more customers, we need more leads, we need to do more marketing, or we need to sell more stuff, and we need to kind of incentivize our sales teams harder, which basically means performance manage them. And actually, all of those things might well be true, but I guess fundamentally, you've got to understand, why do people come to you in the first place? If you've got clients that remain loyal or come to you every week or always use you for their products or services, the first part is to understand why. Because if you're doing things really, really good or things really, really well for your existing clients, it's a fair, reasonable leap to assume that might also be appealing for new clients or prospects. And what you'll also find when you start to ask that question is you'll find there's some stuff there that in isolation, they're probably not enough to make the customer leave or the client to seek out one of your competitors. But if it carries on for any length of time, or there's one irritant after another that's just kind of overlaid, eventually these are the things that will drive your clients into the arms of your competitors. So you can do nothing and kind of look at your sales line to understand why it's going backwards. You can put more pressure on the sales team to sell more, or you can charge marketing with getting you more leads. All of those stuffs may work, but actually if you can't fix the holes in the bottom of that particular bucket, what you'll be actually doing is working really, really hard to effectively stand still.
Yeah, and that's another good thing, because there is a focus in businesses. We want to bring more new business in, and you have a leaky bucket, and it is very, very hard work. I know we shared a story. You shared a story with me about a business that you went to see, thought they were doing well, tried to maximize some profitability, and without knowing it, sort of destroyed the business. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I think whenever you go to your clients and ask them, what do you like and what do you not like, most businesses think it's going to be Pandora's box, where actually we get told loads of things that we don't like and stuff we don't get right and stuff that we need to fix, stuff that's wrong. And actually, it's quite the opposite. You typically find out that, most businesses that have got real significant problems would have already known about it. They're probably out of business already, or certainly might survive the current downturn, but certainly won't survive the recovery. Actually, what you get when you start to speak to your clients, you start to find out there are some things that they like that you didn't even know about. And it could be that the person at the front of the restaurant and his smiley disposition, it could be the way they greeted the reception. There could be a whole host of things that your team do really, really well that you didn't realize was that important. You didn't realize it was such a big deal for clients or customers. So when you find out what's working well within your business, you can ring fence it or enhance it or make it better, or have the people who are making the difference understand that when you do what you do, it makes a huge difference to the way our clients and customers feel. And the example you referred to was a business that was looking to expand and grow, and they thought that they knew more than their customers, which is always a dangerous place for any business leader to be, to assume that you know more than your customers. And they were going to bolt on an extra part of their business because it would bring in different customers, different types of customers, and would then build on their existing base, which was quite good, but they wanted to go more. And actually, what they didn't realize is all the things they were looking to introduce to their business were the exact things that their existing clients weren't looking for. That actually would drive them away. So they built this brand new shiny piece of the business. They brought in loads of new customers, but they also drove away huge amounts of their existing customers, and then sat there scratching their head thinking, well, we've just spent all this money on this project. We've just spent all this money on adding additional weaponry to our arsenal in terms of selling more stuff. And we're selling less stuff. So one business goes up because it's new, and one business comes down because actually we didn't think about the impact on them. So they didn't realize, they didn't protect the things that I guess made them successful in the first place.
And that's an interesting. You made a comment there. So I'm a business owner. I'm looking at my business. We want to do well, and it's interesting when you're in a market that maybe has 1, 2, 3% share. And you think, well, if we increase our market by 5%, we've done well. When you've got such a small area of the market, doubling it should be an ambition. And I really loved how you said about ring fence. So I'm standing there looking at my business, and I'm going, which bits are good, and how do I ring fence? And someone says to me, Ian Kelsall of Insight 6 is your man. What sort of process would you go to identify the things that we should ring fence and polish and hold tightly onto, and the stuff that we can do something with, or the stuff that we're going to bring in? I mean, what sort of approach do you take to that? And how am I affected? I mean, because you bring a consultant like yourself in, and I'm thinking, oh God, there's like 6 months of my life gone away, and I can't do anything else. How does this work?
Great question. Again, our programs typically, I guess, are all around feedback and insights, as you'd expect from a company called Insight 6, and that can come from a variety of different places. So we need to find out if businesses have got large amounts of colleagues. We need to find out what's going on for colleagues. Do the colleagues enjoy their work? Are they trained properly? Have they been given the skills and the tools to do their job? Do they find that the 3 flights of stairs they've got to walk to because the photocopier on their floor doesn't work properly? Does that impact on how they feel about their business? Does that leak into the sort of customer experience because the colleagues aren't happy? So that's kind of an area that we would start to look at. We then start to get feedback from clients. So a variety of ways to do that. You can interview people. We can phone them up and do a kind of a telephone interview. We can send out surveys, electronic surveys, and we can send in mystery shoppers to try and find out what that experience really feels like. But fundamentally, we're looking at trying to get an idea as to, well, what is the current experience? And wherever that current experience starts or stops, it doesn't really matter. All that matters is it gets better from that. So again, lots of businesses think, well, what if I'm not perfect? What if I'm not 100%? Very few businesses are. But if you're 50%, 60%, or even 70% in the eyes of your customers, all that matters is that you'd get another few percent better. So taking a benchmark as to where that customer experience currently is a helpful place to start. And then also looking at your competitors. Look at what makes your competitors successful. What commonalities do you have? Again, another thing I often say to clients or prospects at the time is, well, if somebody else sells the same things you sell for the same price you sell it for, why should I bother picking you? What are those little extra bits of value that you can add that make me feel, when I sit at that kitchen table and I've rang up 5 people who've all given me the same quote to do the same thing, why should I pick you? What's different? How do you make me feel like, I don't know what it was about Roy, he just seemed to care a bit more, or he just seemed to listen a bit more.
I think that's the thing. Why should I even bother picking you? And that's the great unknown, isn't it? Why should I bother? And I guess just going into retail, it isn't about the window dressing. The window dressing's the first touch. And I certainly remember a story going back where I used to deal with an electronics company. And the window dressing was awesome, and they could always get the stuff. And I worked with them for years. But one thing, they came out with one thing that royally cheesed me off. And it is those incremental little bits that can be undone in a heartbeat by something relatively simple. And I guess this is something that I guess your ring fencing will do more of that do
Yeah.
less of that. Don't bother at all with that, because I guess, I mean, how many clients do Insight 6 work with to improve their customer experience?
Across the nation, we work with hundreds of clients, again, across a multitude of sectors. One of the questions we constantly get asked is, well, do you do work in this sector or that sector, or do you work with certain clients of a certain size, big or small? What's your typical prospect or client look like? And we've got hundreds of professional services clients. We had hundreds of retail and hospitality clients. We work with education. We work with universities, schools, colleges. And we work with large multinationals, and we work with small one-man bands. I think what all of our clients have in common is they all have a desire to make sure that the customer experience is brilliant. They understand that the way that they can get picked over of their competition is just by doing things differently or better, or say ring fencing the things that they do well. They understand that if they look after their colleagues and they look after their clients or customers, then they'll win. The commercial side of it doesn't quite take care of itself, but it certainly is more helpful if you know that the clients that you get are going to stay with you. If you know what really works well to attract new clients, and more importantly as well, I think when you've got the ability to expand those clients, that's also quite important as well. So again, you mentioned retail. My background is largely in retail before I set this business up a few years ago. And we used to have people that would come into a shop and drive past every single other supermarket for the last 10 miles in order to come to the one that I happen to be in. And sadly, it wasn't because of me, because of Sally sat until 16 is brilliant because she sits there and chats and listens and makes me feel great. So people have chosen to come out of their way, past lots of alternatives, which ultimately sell the same sorts of things, the same sorts of prices, to experience one person sat on a particular till at a particular hour on a particular day. That's the power of somebody in your business that does it brilliantly, versus maybe somebody that doesn't do it quite so well. So that's the difference that people can make. And as I said before, in terms of expanding your clients, and this is quite an interesting one. So every business, and again, this is another sort of retail analogy, so apologies for over indexing on that. Retail is quite simple. Get those who come and shop with you to spend more, and get those who don't shop with you to shop with you in the first place. And I think you can take that kind of approach to every single business. If you've got people that don't currently use your services, that's what you need to do in terms of client attraction and client conversion. But also don't forget that your clients that are already with you, they're probably not spending as much with you as you would like. If they buy product X, do they potentially buy product Y? If they come to you 2 days a week, maybe they can get them to come to 3. If they currently spend £15 at a time, how do you get them to spend £16 or £17? So expanding your existing clients is a huge opportunity for businesses to grow.
And then certainly that's a big. I'm getting a bit of feedback here. Certainly, there's something that's very high on my list as a sales trainer. How do we get our existing clients to get the right message in order to do more? Because it takes a lot. It takes a lot more to get a new client than keep an existing client. So I mean, you must have some absolute. I mean, going back, you was talking about experience. I guess the point I was making is that as a business owner, we can stand there and look around and say, well, everything sort of looks rosy. I'm going to do a little bit on customer experience, but I wouldn't even know where to look. I wouldn't even know what rock to look under to see what's going well. And I can't say that I'd be particularly fond of the idea of doing that anyway. But and I think it's that first step that customer experience yields a real payback on investment. And I say investment because I guess some people could see this as a cost to my business. Let's not bother. But everything seems to be okay. But it is an investment, and I guess you've got some great stories of things that you've unearthed which have shaken your prospects to the core when they discovered it. Have you got any you could share with us?
Yeah, and obviously keep the names private to protect the guilty. But I think where do you start? You definitely start with getting feedback. You have to ask again something as simple as, how do you rate this particular business? And it can be good, bad, satisfied, not satisfied, scale of 0 to 10. You name whichever rating you like, without getting into the technicalities of different ways of measuring. But fundamentally, getting some feedback from somebody that says, are we any good? And if you think we're good, well, what are the reasons that you think we're good? And if we're not very good and we're disappointing you, well, what are the reasons that you're disappointed? So we can start to fix those things and get better. And what you tend to find in businesses, and again, there's plenty of businesses that spring to mind. There was one business I was working with, they were looking to put their marketing material, and actually their location, again, Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire, they thought was a real problem. They thought that actually most people didn't come to use this particular facility because of its location. And we did some work on their existing users, their existing incumbents and customers and clients. And what they found was one of the key drivers for the person coming to this area was Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire. So far from being a reason why they weren't coming, it was actually the reason for them to come to this area. So they didn't want a big city experience of Manchester or Liverpool or Birmingham. They quite liked the conurbation of Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire, all the things that it brought. So their marketing team suddenly went, geez, we were about to almost downplay that and almost apologize and make excuses for it, whereas actually we should be singing loud and proud about it, because that's what our existing people have chosen to come for.
And so they should. As a born and bred Stoke-on-Trent boy, I'm delighted. That's the message. That's made me smile for today, because I love this area. Great people. I mean, it's a great place to be. So yeah. I mean, when people start making assumptions about things that they have no tangible evidence for, it can be a bit of a train wreck. And that's scary, right? That's absolutely scary.
I think the scary bit's the important one. I think it's a huge leap of faith for people to open up that say Pandora's box, where they think, if I invite people to tell me what they really think, what they're actually going to do is put the boot in. And actually, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. We've got lots of clients, as I say, we mystery shop, and it's the same sort of experience. They think you're going to come and find all the things that are wrong, and actually we don't. We find an awful lot of things that are right. I think that the lowest, again, we write these reports all bespoke for our clients, but the lowest score I think any of my clients has ever got is 65%, which says that they do more right than they do wrong. So that's a place to build on. So there is a lot of nervousness around what you might find out, but invariably, and again, we've got hundreds, thousands of clients across the UK. There's always usually more going right than going wrong. It's just a question of people don't know that. So once you get past that fear factor of, well, I'm going to invite an awful lot of criticism, actually what you do get is you get a lot of feedback. And most of that feedback generally is, these are the things that you do really, really well, because that's why I'm a big fan and I recommend you to other people. These are some things that are okay, but actually doesn't really set my heart racing, so therefore it's kind of average. And there's bound to be a few things there where people say, do you know what, it narks me. But the beauty about feedback like that is, A, you can do something about it, because you can't fix what you didn't know was broken. But more importantly as well, customers have to, I guess, have a relationship that makes them think that you care in the first place to even bother telling you. So we've all been on the receiving end of a survey from a business that asks you to rate their experience, and you've rated it quite poor. And then you're waiting for the phone to call, where somebody picks up the phone and says, oh, Roy, thanks for filling in the survey. I'm sorry, your experience wasn't very good. Let me talk to you a bit more about what went wrong. You don't get that phone call. You just say, well, it's not very good, and that's the end of it. So they're kind of going through the motions of suggesting that they really care what you think, but actually with no follow-up to poor feedback, they just indicate that actually we don't really care that much. We're just trying to collect loads of data, and that's pointless. So getting data is one thing. Doing something about it, I guess, is then the most important thing. So one of the challenges we get a lot is, well, I can go and do all this stuff for free. I'll go and get SurveyMonkey, and I can write a few questions and I can send that out. It won't cost me a penny. And you're right, it won't. But you're unlikely to do anything with it. It's unlikely to be helpful. It's unlikely to kind of unlock, I guess, the potential in your business to use the things that we do to make your business better. So if somebody's in the market for a free SurveyMonkey survey, be my guest, but that isn't typically the clients that we look to work with, because collecting the data is one thing, actually using it to improve your business is something else.
That's interesting. It brings me to one of my last questions. So what we see in certainly sales and leadership training, the people who are investing to make that aspect of their business better are typically quite good at it already. And I'm already looking at the top 10, 20% of their industry, either who want to 10, 20% of their industry, and they want to even further improve. Typically, the people who invest in themselves and their company are typically the A players already. But I mean, they're looking to even further push on. I mean, is that the same with CX? What sort of people are a typical client?
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. I think where we have to almost convince people that looking after their people and looking after their customers is a good thing to do, it doesn't usually end particularly well. The A players that you refer to, they're already there. They've got it. They understand it. They just don't quite know how to probably figure it out, or maybe their time is best spent on other things, and then they can kind of parachute us in as a kind of an in-sourced CX team. But the investment's quite interesting because I find the biggest investment, it's not financial. There's a financial investment that's clearly required. The investment that's required is often it's time, it's behaviors, it's tolerance, it's a willingness to scratch the surface and maybe look in the mirror at yourself around what you and your organization does. It requires a much more, I think, a bigger investment in those sorts of tolerances, for want of a better expression, than anything about the amount of money that we charge. And you mentioned before about the ROI. We've got programs that are delivering significant ROIs on a small investment, actually. And we've got other programs that, again, are big and delivering good ROI in there. So the size and scale of your budget isn't really a predeterminating factor whether you should do CX or not. We've got programs that can scale large or scale small. And to give you one good example, we were working with a firm that was quite heavily reliant on incoming phone calls. And with everybody working from home, or at least a large chunk working from home now, they've done what everybody else has done, which is move things around so that phone calls get diverted from the office to different people's homes. And one of the programs we happen to have in place, we were checking that it all worked okay. And we found out that one of those links was broken. So one of their staff wasn't receiving the phone calls they should receive. And that had been broken for the best part of 6 months before we started to work with them, and they didn't know. They didn't know. So in addition to not receiving those client calls, the client was also going around telling all their friends, don't bother calling company X because they don't care. They don't call you back. I left a message and nobody rang. It just wasn't working. So that particular person said, you know what, just in the space of a few weeks, that program's more than paid for itself to find that error.
I guess I've got another final question. When you remember a staff, certainly in a big organization, one of the scariest things that happen is someone walks into the building and goes, I'm from head office, I'm here to help. And it's usually, oh, here we go. How does staff feel? I mean, how is their response when someone like you walks in and says, hey, look, we're working on customer experience, and we're here to help? I mean, do they run for the hills? I mean, what's the general response?
Again, another great question. I've not experienced that myself, because generally it's like, oh my goodness, somebody's actually going to listen to us and fix these types of things. Because again, I suppose the programs start with the team. So if ever you were sat in a business where there was things that weren't quite right, things that irritate you, things that you've had to tolerate, now's as good a chance as any to kind of get it off your chest. Because generally the businesses we work with, as I said before, they understand that colleagues cannot deliver a great client experience if they're a bit grumpy themselves. So they often take a sigh of relief, I guess, that somebody here is to actually listen and do something about it. Now again, in every organization, as you imagine, it's not a bottomless pit. There are some things that the business is quite happy to go and implement immediately. There's some things that need a bit of time to think about and plan. And then there's just some stuff they just can't do. But at least you get to understand why it can't be done. It's actually the reaction of the middle management and the leadership teams that's probably more interesting, because they'll turn around and say, do you know what, if the team had told me that, I could have fixed it. Which then takes you to the next natural question, which is, well, why do you think they didn't? They clearly thought you got bigger fish to fry, or it wasn't that important. You didn't really care that the food in the fridge kept getting stolen, or, as I say, the photocopy wasn't worked, or the stationery cupboard was always empty. Maybe they thought that was irrelevant. So they tend to tell us things that business owners said, you know what, we can go and fix that easily. And then once you've got through that process where the team either know that the problem's going to get fixed, the problem's under consideration, or the problem just can't be fixed, but at least we've been heard, that takes you nicely to the next step, which is actually, okay, how do we then really focus on the people that really matter, which is the people that pay our wages? So it all starts with colleagues, quite clearly, but a business without customers isn't a business. So once we've kind of got the colleagues to a place where they're comfortable, that actually they're being looked after correctly, we can then move on to look at the client experience.
That's great. I'm conscious of the time. We're due to finish. How can people get in touch with you, Ian?
Great question. So they can contact me on the telephone number I'm going to read out now, which is 07786 657 544. That's 07786 657 544. And my email address is Ian, so that's IAN.Kelsall, KELSALL at insight, INSIGHT, and then a number 6 at the end.com. So it's ian.kelsall at insight6.com. Or again, if you visit the Insight 6 website, www.insight6.com, you can find my contact details there.
That's fantastic. Really appreciate your time. Roy Johnson, Sandler Trade. It's been great spending half an hour with Ian and learning all about CX, and we shall be working together because I'm curious to know how we are. Thank you very much. See you again soon. Going to sign off now. Say bye-bye, Ian.
Thanks, Roy. Bye-bye.
Bye.